From the center of the galaxy, this is Force Center, a live show about Star Wars pop culture and the ultimate adventure, dealing with the internet. I'm Ken Napzok.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw, and I'm very happy to have some other sounds coming in because at my apartment building, Ken, it's Hedge Trimmer Monday. Hedge trimmers are a sound that I think is designed to compete with leaf blowers to drive any other thought from your mind and remove the tiny morsel you might have left of sanity.
Luckily, we can't hear him yet, but you remind me. Not only is it my normal gardening landscaping day, they're trimming trees any minute now. So you and I might have the sounds of machinery in the background.
It's like the Empire is relentless. That's the sound Palpatine makes to destroy democracy in your mind.
Our colleague Jennifer Landa is planning to join us shortly. If you watch the news show tomorrow, you'll see why she was maybe slightly delayed or not even on this episode. We're trying. She definitely wants to be here. So, Joseph, good to have you back in the saddle. We talk in detail more tomorrow on the news, but you're back, baby. You're back.
Yeah. Happy to be here. I was had a brief getaway with my wife for her birthday. It's a busy time for us, Ken. Her birthday is March 25th, and today, as we record, March 31st, is the anniversary of our first date. And it is lovely to celebrate the anniversary of our first date, but the march of time is difficult. Today is the 20th anniversary of our first date.
Yeah, time's been messing with me a lot lately. I don't know if I enjoy that, but good for you all there. Good for you all there.
I was deleting old photos from quite a while ago, and I came across one. It's like a party at your apartment. It's like, I think this is the party where Ken and Grace really started flirting.
Yes, that was the one. That was the one. Yes.
Yep.
Long time ago. Yes, there's people at that party no longer on the guest list. Quite a time. Yeah. I was last week. I think I popped on the Bombad cast. Scotty and Jerry were doing a retrospective of Star Wars Celebration, and looking forward to Star Wars Celebration Japan. So I went through a bunch of old photos, and I've been saying this on some other shows. It wasn't just fun memories. It was, look, there's Joseph and I in Chicago. There's this, there's that. There's Anaheim 2015. It effed with me. The march of time and the feeling that those moments I could reach out and touch them because they're so vibrant and recent and it's 10 years, it's 7 years, it's 8 years, and it's another me. It messed with my head. I was a little out of it for a couple of days.
I've gotten a little bit better at doing this. I need to get rid of some of the photos on my phone because they're not. There's too many, and I could back them up, and I do have them backed up. But it's also just like I take pictures of like dumb signs to make a joke, and sometimes I just don't delete them. And I'll do like, here's a funny "don't slip in the bathroom," and I have 8 photos of it. So I need to go through and kind of try to get rid of some of those. But it is hard because it's an emotional task. It's just like that was a great moment. I don't see that person enough. Is that really what I was doing? And that's how I was spending my time in March of 2018. And then it's like, that business is closed. It's just, an avalanche of emotions to go through photos. And it isn't just the really obvious ones of like a loved one who's not with you anymore. That it's the I remember the day I had that pie. It was the only day I was happy that month. That's like hard.
Yep. Yeah, I'm doing the photo deletes as well, but also like it's a record, right? This is our record, and Steve Breedlove in chat says my wife and I were just talking about printing out a book to preserve old photos, and you can get kind of printers that you can connect your phone to. But if I go, Joseph, and they pick up my phone, this is the sickness I have. I save every Fortnite victory I take. I take a photo of the screen. This is bizarre. I have 677 photos of the final moments of every Fortnite match I've won.
But at least you have them in an album, right?
Yes. So it started as a joke where I was like, I texted a friend, I'm like, look, I won. And then I just started doing it, and I can't stop. So they're going to be like, what did this guy do? He went to Star Wars conventions and played Fortnite. Yeah, he brought nothing to the world.
I look forward don't look forward to it. The sad day 100 years from now when you pass and a garbage song will play over those images.
He's only happy when he wins.
That's a good one. When it rains.
There you go. Brian Wirtz has found a picture from Force Center live show at Star Wars Celebration Chicago 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too. Of just like that's a recent memory to me, and intellectually, I know that is not recent.
Yeah,
it feels recent.
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, Jay from Nowhere coming in here with the good logic. When you live in a dystopian America country, you got to find joy where you can. Like beating people on the internet.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, we're not here just to talk about deleting photos and the pain of the passage of time. We're also here to talk about gritty Star Wars.
Yes.
And
gritty indeed.
People in the chat have already been making the joke. Are we talking about the mascot? Svetnik, are we talking about that one mascot, Gritty? I don't think I want it in Star Wars. Just a slight bit of redesign. If you made Gritty grittier, I could see Gritty as a creature in Star Wars.
I think Gritty would he'd scob the Empire. He'd say scob the Empire. I think he'd be good. Before we get to the big question, important question from our buddy Rick Villanueva is Ken sipping a Yoo-hoo. No, I've been obsessed with this new. It's not new, but it's an aloe vera drink. So it's really tasty, but it also has gelatinous pieces of the fruit that you're drinking, and it sounds disgusting, but it's great. So that's what I'm drinking.
Yeah, in case the inside of your colon gets a suntan, you don't want to get burnt. You gotta drink Aloe King.
There you go.
Gritty scobs confirmed, says Osvetnik. Well, this is great to just hang out, but we will we'll get to talking about some of the Star Wars. As always, if you have questions or opinions about gritty storytelling in Star Wars, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to answer all questions and share lots of opinions. But of course, super chats help us keep everything going, help keep the lights on, literally. So we will be sure to get to any of those. Laughing at some of the comments already. But here's the question. We pull the questions, the topics for these live Q&As from patrons on Patreon. And this one came to us from James Farley, who said, with Andor moving toward its conclusion this spring, would you like to see a new Star Wars series pursue a similar style and tone? What characters, conflicts, or eras might be especially well suited to this particular flavor at the Star Wars buffet? So, Ken, where do you go with that?
Yeah, first thing I go, look at what eras need to be explored in mind. And we could talk all day about the definition of dark and gritty. It's this general kind of discussion point that's been in pop culture, I think, since I jumped into the podcast world in full, when it was, do you like your superhero movies like Avengers, or do you like it like Nolan's Batman? And that just kind of has never gone away. Andor, I think, falls in that category. But in terms of tone, I where we can focus it, I definitely think it's the Old Republic comes up a lot, and that would make a lot of sense. And there's a lot of people who like that quote unquote style of Star Wars there. And I haven't spent a lot of time in the Old Republic stuff or the Knights of the Old Republic game, but I think that's an era you could explore. But I'm trying to move from that to another era. And I think of a Bloodline. I think of that great book of Leia and the politics of the New Republic era, even though we're getting a lot of content, stories, whatever you want to say, in the era, to drill down on it in a way where, like, all right, and again, it's hard to do with the character of Leia. Do you recast and all those kind of questions? And I think, do it, recast. It's Leia at a different point in her life, and the discussions, the things building up to Leia being considered a warmonger, those the moving of the capital to Hosnian Prime or around, and kind of how they establish all that. Mandalorian season 3 touched a lot upon the New Republic, the warts and all of reestablishing it. But I think that's the next logical spot where I'd want to take this tone, not necessarily dark and gritty, but the tone to this era.
I agree with that about that era, and I'll follow up on that. But I also want to just kind of discuss, what do we mean when we say gritty? I think gritty can be tone. It can be, Blade Runner, Dark City, all of these kind of storytelling that's a little bit more of a dystopian vibe, a little bit more of like everything is grim and hard and dirty. And, and people like Luthen do what they have to get, like,
Summer skies.
That's tone, that's storytelling. And then there is the actual plot of Andor, which I think sometimes people are responding to it's grittier in terms of like it is actually people having a harder time going through harder things. But it's also on that sort of balance in Star Wars of how much of it is wild fantasy to how much of it is grounded in sort of real world workings of politics. Like Andor goes back to, I think, a now very dated dislike of the prequels that was just a rejection of realism in the minutia of realism in Star Wars. Because the original trilogy was, you had the political background, but it was very broad. And to jump from Han Solo flies the Millennium Falcon out of an asteroid before he gets eaten by a giant space slug to the crawl of the Phantom Menace of like, let's talk about tax trade and routes, taxation of outlying trade routes. People of our generation rejected not tone, but content of Star Wars isn't, it's high fantasy. It isn't about dealing with the minutia of real life. And I would argue that some of what's going on in Andor is a gritty tone, but a lot of it is like, no, let's embrace how a guy named Tim Carlo, who has human socks, trapped in a very realistic kind of love triangle with this guy. How does this guy, how do these real people intersect with this high fantasy story? And so what I think would be exciting is I don't need the always a little bit more the grim dark tone, but I am interested in more political intrigue, more how are day-to-day citizens caught up in the reality of the political environment. So in terms of eras, I think Bloodline's a great example. The other things that I think are a great example of storytelling, which I wouldn't mind if it's just adaptations of this books or these characters, but the Phasma book and the Black Spire book, which are kind of they connect. But in particular, Vimerati, who I believe you can still see at Galaxy's Edge, is a spy for the Resistance. A Vimerati television show set in both the build-up to the sequel trilogy and the actual sequel trilogy. It's kind of gritty, brutal stuff that happens. She gets captured and tortured, and she's living a gritty, real life. So I think that kind of storytelling in that era would be really interesting. Of resistance and proto-resistance spies with a little bit more of an Andor take would be fantastic.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. That's and I like what you're saying. Just even bringing up those books, it's not what often is brought up in the conversation. Which again, you and I are on. We're always, I think, been on the same page of the dark and gritty, what it means, but also what it means to other folks. Which again, it's your own interpretation, but it's sometimes the wrong takeaway to me. Where it always seems to boil down to that you got the people playing with your action figures, and then you got the adults, and sometimes the conversation we're not having that, but it's like I rub up against it too, right? Like it's what you're talking about. It's not just the socks, it's not just Tim with two M's. It's how you present it, how you play with it, but it's all the same world.
And I think at a really basic level, Andor has been extremely successful in the most basic magic trick of storytelling, which is introduce an audience to a character, make the audience care about the character, and then you worry about them. That's what stakes are. Stakes aren't about, is the whole world going to blow up? Stakes are about how much the audience cares about the characters. And we were introduced to everything from, droids to day workers. And we care about them. We care whether or not Cassian is going to spend time with his mom. Like, and I think a television show that's designed to be a television show that introduces us to new characters and we really care about them in their day-to-day life, I think is just a huge, maybe that's all gritty is, is caring about the people.
Yeah, no, it's like Lucas's world building is not just about the designs or the dirty walls. It's It's those characters. It's the connections. It's their stories. They're lived in the. There's that great Filoni quote that's out there going around about talking about Snips and Sky Guy and that stuff. It's like that's just as much George's world building and his realistic world building as the Dirty Walls and A New Hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. There is a very, very good conversations going on in our chat, and one thing that keeps coming up, Ken, which I feel we should discuss. Our friend Brian Ward shares this. Gritty is fine as long as it isn't at the cost of the elements that I love about Star Wars. Both can exist together. Other people are also sharing, wanting a little bit more fun, wanting hope, wanting pulp mixed in with the grittiness and the realistic stakes and the very hard times. Also, we'll do a plug for Brian Ward's series that he's doing on social media. I'm following along on Blue Sky, adding the character Kim from Skeleton Crew to shots from Andor. The one of Kim at Mon Mothma's party is one of the most fantastic Star Wars images I've seen in a long time. So check that out.
And in my head, she was there. She was there.
Just under the camera frame, just popping up. Yeah, I think these are really important discussions because I think Star Wars. I do always want an element of pulp, of fantasy, of weirdness, because I think it is part of what Star Wars is. I do always like some element of hope. Now, I'm okay if it gets real dark and there's just a flash of hope, because I think one of the things that Star Wars has been very successful at is the moments of hope, the moments of victory feel so incredibly earned. They don't feel saccharine because the characters go through awful things. Even the first film, if you just watch and go, that was fun, and then go, hey, but tell me what happened. How many parent figures did the main character watch die?
Burn.
How many genocides did you see? It means that the victories feel earned, and not just it's a happy world where we get in a little bit of trouble, but everything's fine. So I think the darkness in Star Wars is a big part of it, and I really agree with people in the chat who I feel like I want to see people come down into the depths so that they're rising up out of it is more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the best shows to do it. I do still think it's Bad Batch. Whatever your definition of dark and gritty, but like played straight, played so realistically, but there's also pinching crab monsters around. There's the return of our Godzilla like monster. Like there's the elements of Star Wars with all the things that you come to associate with dark and gritty, that general description of shows. Yeah,
and
give me more Bad Batch.
Omega's youthful sense of hope.
Yeah, it's there. Sorry, I'm eating my drink. But that's why you and I talk often about The Outpost. It's just like, God, that's a film. That's a film to itself.
Yeah, I mean that episode, I can't remember the title of the one with Cody. That one is fantastic.
That's like episode 3 of that season, right? Yeah, with the separatists and everything. Yeah.
And that's the one where it's like, okay, it starts when they're on season 2 starts with them being chased on the beach, right?
Yes.
Dave McKay, the solitary clone. Yeah. And then that is just a little brutal film about the choices you make. Can you change? And but and that one's like a good example too. It's incredibly gritty. It is Crosshair making the choice to just say, I don't care about the ideology. I just care about being a good soldier. And I was told to shoot this man, whether it's even remotely moral. And he just brutally kills this man in an immoral way. Right. And if the episode ended there, you'd be like, bummer. But it ends on the moment of hope of Cody going, yeah, no, not for me. And Cody walking away and saying no to it is the moment we end on.
Yeah.
And I think I just need that spark of hope, and then I'm okay with exploring some of the more grittiness myself.
Yeah. It's why I once got not an argument, but we didn't have time. But it was always my only appearance on New Rockstars when someone brought up the chat of like, I want an R-rated Star Wars, and I'm like, that can't exist to me. That just can't exist for the Star Wars, and I still stand by that. I know what people mean when they say that, and I know what they want, and Andor scratches that itch. But it does undercut some of the principles of Star Wars, which is not just about George and the kids and the 12-year-olds, but just what Star Wars aims to do. It doesn't mean you couldn't, but it just, again, it's like, what is that? What is the definition of that? Nudity, screwing, smooching, blasting, blood coming out. Like, I think that's what you want, and that's not what. As someone who had 2 9-year-olds screaming, crying behind them as Palpatine was electrocuted by Mace Windu, this like the flashback of the saber. That's not great for Star. I mean, it's good for Revenge of the Sith, but it's just like we can't have more of that. I don't want more of that. I'd fight against the idea.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think the R-rated thing for me, that question is always like, what do you really mean by that, and what do you really want? Because if it's horror in terms of actual events, it's there. If it's taking the characters emotionally seriously, it is there. If it's violence, it's absolutely there. It's just that we don't show it in gory detail. Like if you want sexuality and romance, it's there. I'd take more these days. But it's all about. There's a part of me that wants someone to make the like, okay, what if Revenge of the Sith was R-rated, and then we just get these like disgusting close-up shots of Palpatine's flesh dripping and flapping on the carpet as his face melts and children scream, and we just, I mean, you think of Revenge of the Sith and like. What would make that R-rated? When Anakin murders children, and that's not gritty enough for you. What is it you physically want to see?
Yeah, you want to see Source Band Deep cut in 2.
Now stand up and go, yeah, that's what I want.
And again, to it, Sergeant Fubar says, totally agree, Kat, everything. An R-rated is supposed to bring is already either present in Star Wars or would be gratuitous and continue to and counter to what Star Wars would be. It's just, and again, I don't immediately get angry at anyone around me who's like, I want an R-rated Star Wars. I know what you mean. I know what you've grown up, and Caravan of Courage is embarrassing to you. Jar Jar stepping in the poopy is something you can't move past, and you want Star Wars to meet you at your age and. In terms of what it looks like and what the action is, exactly. You want Source Bandim to be sliced into in front of you, and it's just we have other shows, and we have other things for that.
And I don't think a lot of people actually mean that. I think that I think R-rated for them. R-rated means not silly, not for kids. It means serious adult Star Wars. Yep. James Farley, who submitted this question in the chat, says, admittedly, when I submitted this question, I avoided the word gritty in favor of the more vague style and tone of Andor, because I thought that would carry a lot of baggage. But I appreciate the need to condense these questions into neat live stream titles. Thank you for writing in with that, James, and mea culpa. I literally did when I was making the thumbnail for this, being like, how do I encapsulate this down into a small amount of text that will be large enough on the thumbnail? And you're right, gritty, I think, it is a buzzword both for people who want it and love it, and for people who are frustrated by it. So maybe using it does direct our conversation in a particular way. But for me, I think that's in a way what's interesting about this topic is what when people are like, I like Andor, I like the style and tone, as you said, James, what is meant by that? Is it more realistic storytelling? Is it that there's less high fantasy in the story? Is it that we're spending more time? Is it more pedestrian? Like we're literally spending more time with day-to-day regular citizens of the galaxy and not senators and Jedi. So I guess for you, Ken, like what you do like about Andor, what you do like about the style and tone of Andor, what word would you use to describe what it is that you actually like?
Yeah, that's fair, because fair question, because and I'm glad James brought it up, because I'm such a huge fan of the tone, style, and approach of Andor, and I don't know how to describe it without also setting up another wildfire of debate of because I could say realistic, but all I mean about like Andor is just as connected to the Lord of the Rings trilogy to me as it is anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Where that is high fantasy at the highest level, and it just feels and dialogue that is very poetic and it's prose more than dialogue at times. But it doesn't feel that way. And sometimes lobbing that the complaint at the prequels for some of the words, or even just George in general and Carrie and Mark and Harrison for years saying you can write it but you can't say it. All true. I think that's what I love about Andor and Solo and Rogue One and the sequel trilogy. You could pluck Adam Driver, put him anywhere. You could take Mother Anastasia from Acolyte, put her anywhere. Where sometimes there's this tones where, for me personally, again, I'm struggling to bottle it up into a word other than realistic. Where sometimes I don't enjoy. Just some of the dialogue approach or the acting choices or the directing choices that make it seem a little more distant to me as a fan versus Andor. I feel like I could be in that cafe, I could be in that bar and have that conversation. I connect to it in a different way. But Solo's the same thing. I think Solo, Rogue One, Andor, they all have the same vibe. I wouldn't separate those three projects.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people are saying relatable. Grounded. A lot of people are saying grounded. I think those are all good words for it. Steve Breedlove says cereal being berated creates a contrast with Andor, who had a loving mother. That was in response to another part of a conversation, but I think that's a great example. Another example of the more pedestrian, quotidian, the day-to-day life story. Mm-hmm. I think for me, what I like about Andor is the style and tone is, I think it is trying to evoke Battlestar Galactica, The Expanse, as other people are saying. I think it is trying to, right. Breaking Bad, it's trying to use the language of modern prestige television to give it this really grounded sense. What I like is it's a style of storytelling that matches what the characters are going through. It is a bleak time in the galaxy. So watching people without the greatest clothes, working hard jobs, struggling to find any little bit of happiness is because the cloud of the dark side has fallen. And these people are struggling because they've been made to struggle. And the fantasy part of it being farther away is the Jedi are gone. Hope is gone. And so a character like Marva years earlier might have been watching Hollows about the Jedi and had some sense of there's still magic in the galaxy. There's still hope in the galaxy. There's still heroes in the galaxy. And I kind of like that these are characters who are detached from some of the more fantastical elements of Star Wars because the Empire has literally destroyed those parts, some of those parts of the galaxy in terms of the Jedi, not in terms of like weird monsters and aliens, which I would love to pop up more. Yeah. So I do like that the storytelling sort of reflects some of what is going on in the galaxy at that moment. I went on about this on our news show that will release tomorrow. In regards to the Andor season 2 trailer, I think Dedra Meero is having a panic attack, but the idea of her being force choked is exciting to me. I don't think it's in the show, but I think it would be because she's a character whose entire life it's not about the fantastical. She doesn't have weird fantasy adventures on swamps fighting crab monsters, and she doesn't know that the Emperor is a cackling dark sorcerer. So what would it be if a character like that encountered that? Because that's not her world. And for me, some of the tone of Andor works because we're focusing on the characters who don't deal with swamp creatures and dark witches on Dathomir. It's not their world. Yeah.
They're not. Yeah, they're in the hallways. They're in the conference rooms.
Yeah.
It's all fast. Again, perspective and everything. And I go down the path too a lot where I just think of covering Game of Thrones all those years and working with folks who love the show, but would tell me on and off air on some of the shows I hosted. I just don't like it when the show brings in magic. It's like, this is literally a show about magic.
It's about the denial of magic. I mean, have they watched? I mean, just rewatch the first episode, the first minutes of the first episode. Set up like magic is coming back, and it's gonna f everybody's life, and no one wants to talk about it or believe it. It's the the entire thing is like a story about climate denial.
And it gets but it's hard for me to not bring up those points and it just kind of connect it in a general sense. If this isn't you, it's not directed to you, but it's just like there's a lot of that internalized shame for being a nerd in the 80s and 90s, or the whole, you and I have discussed just playing with your toys is really insulting and really misses the point of what we were doing with our toys. It was imagination manifest in our hands, and a lot of the folks that I have these conversations with in Game of Thrones, which is gritty and dark and violent and sexy and R-rated at every sense of the definition. But you're reacting to the fact of like, oh, something fun from my child. And not that magic and Game of Thrones is fun, but just like something with a bit whimsy, that's stereotypically whimsy, magic, dragons, witches, things. I can't like that. I can't like. I'm not a nerd, man. I'm not a nerd, bro. And it just, there was a lot of that. And I think when it finds its way into Star Wars, which is why I'm trying to choose I describe how I love Andor carefully. I still run into that. It's still the thing, the show. As Brian Ward once said, Andor is for Star Wars fans who are embarrassed about being Star Wars fans. That's so much of this conversation for me that I can't separate it sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is I try to separate my love of Andor and what I appreciate about it with a dismissal of the rest of Star Wars. And I certainly even have friends in real life who are like, man, the first part of your sentence where you tell me you love Andor is great, and I'm just waiting for that second part of your sentence.
Yes.
Where you tell me all the parts of Star Wars I love are stupid and childish.
Yes.
Let's talk about the word relatable for a second. I think maybe relatable isn't about does this person have a job like me? Like I don't need a show about Star Wars holocasters in order to feel like it's relatable, because hey, they do exactly what I do. I need to say I recognize that human thing that person is experiencing, because I've experienced it too. And I think the popularity of Star Wars, of the original film in 1977, we talk about the special effects, we talk about the combination of, high fantasy and old westerns and serials with the myth of Joseph Campbell, blah, 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 blah. None of that is worth a damn if Luke, Han, and Leia aren't incredibly relatable. My aunt and uncle have never been burned alive while an old man asked me to begin a life of adventure. But we all talk about that sunset moment, the twin sunset, and wanting to be a part of something bigger all the time. We've all been Han Solo going, I don't want to do that. It's going to put me in danger. But as part of me is telling me I got to help people out. Relatable to me is it just, you need to care about the characters, and the characters' emotions need to be real. I don't care if it's an alien with 8 heads who only speaks by spitting lava. If their emotions are real, then it's real. And I think that's where I get real grumpy about Andor. Of Star Wars has always been deeply emotionally real, or it wouldn't work at all. We wouldn't be talking about this if that first film wasn't phenomenal in its emotional reality, in its emotional relatability. And I understand Andor is like, if you're the kind of person who's like, but his best friend's a dog, and I got to get past that in order to see the emotional reality. Andor does really help you with that by going, no dog best friends, so you don't have to see past it if you're of that inclination to see the emotional reality. And
it's all, again, it's a lot of it to me is the dialogue and the approach, and it's sometimes complicated to address, but and I think I've been, you and I, Jan, have been trying to be clear over the years of just how much I love Andor. That shot, that the Aldhani arc where the TIE fighter flies over them is a quote unquote peak Star Wars moment for me. I just love the use of it there. But I just feel sometimes, we were all in the trenches of this war, of also having to say yes. And Kenobi had the slaughter of children. That's how the series started. So I'd say it's pretty heavy, whether or not you thought it was or not, or didn't like Zach Braff's character in his mouth, but that's trouble moving. I don't know what to say anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I guess I would say emotionally real. I want to be emotionally on board with I want the characters to be emotionally real, and that's the parts of like Ahsoka I struggled with. I felt like the actors were doing a great job. The script was really minimal, but I didn't feel as pulled in by what they were feeling. Other people did, and that worked for them.
Yeah.
For me, that's what it's about. Ultimately, it's
I will refrain from the Ahsoka wars. But
yes, fair enough.
No. Just I upset folks when I'm just like that's an example of better acting choices, better directing choices, better dialogue choices. I think could have been made, so that's why I say I get it when someone says I want things more like Andor. I get it. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, or but different choices because they work for some people and some of them don't work for me. And anyway.
Yes.
One other way to look at it for me is almost like music, and obviously we have plenty of words for music, but there are some times of like, I want to listen to the Beastie Boys, and that's an energy. It's up, it's bouncy, right? And then I'm feeling bummed out, and I want to listen to the most depressing Frank Sinatra song about somebody who dumped me with, a 32-piece orchestra all playing minor chords. That's what I want to listen to today, right? And I think Andor maybe almost musically is sometimes like, James Farley used the word tone in his question, and that's maybe it's almost a way to think about it better as musically of like,
I think so, yeah.
If you look at the events of A New Hope, it's just as dark as Andor, right? But musically, it's the Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
And musically, Andor is, what would you use for Andor? What music would you compare Andor to, tone-wise?
It's a Ryan Bingham song. If you all know Ryan Bingham out there, who's alt country. He also is now an actor on one of those Taylor Sheridan shows, but he's someone who's just it's whiskey fueled music that's very political. Or he did the music for the Jeff Bridges Colin Farrell movie Crazy Heart, and so he's got one of my favorite songs of all time there, which is about addiction and loss and this and that. And it's so there's that, and then sometimes you want to talk about the same themes, but I don't know, with a little more upbeat guitar.
Same themes with upbeat guitar. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great songs there where people. Hey, I just watched on Howard Stern, Lady Gaga did a ballad version of her song Abracadabra, and like same lyrics, different. And that's the thing is like, on a real Lady Gaga tear. Watch the performance of Abracadabra on Saturday Night Live, and then watch the performance of Abracadabra on Howard Stern, and that's to me is tone. It isn't content; it's tone.
That actually is maybe even the best way to look at it in terms of same artist, same song, different versions, right? That even makes more sense to me. Exactly what you're talking about. Because let's just turn it into Gaga Center for a second. Is my journey with her went from who is that? What's that meat dress to seeing her perform a song that was popular in a different way, and me going, oh shit, I got it. I get it. I allowed myself to judge that thing, which now I love that thing, and also the meat dress had a lot of purpose and theme and art behind it. It was a statement. And sometimes I think Andor does help people maybe get the core elements of Star Wars that they're not seeing in other things, which is not a negative, not a bad thing. It's just like that's kind of how it works, and I get it.
I think a lot more people will hear the lyrics of Abracadabra in the Howard Stern version than the super dancey version. That's very much the same. If people can really see the ideas of Andor when they're put across with the acting and the dialogue that everybody is talking about here in the chats.
Yeah. And the Jay Fenner's and the gravity, the acting. Yeah, Andor's got wonderful performances. So the other series, but there's just Jen and I were talking a little bit last week too, where it's like one of the great things of Andor is just everyone down to Pegla in the garage, or anyone above an extra or a background player. You feel the performances in a way you don't, and not just other Star Wars, but in other shows. That's why those prestige shows work across the board a little bit more. You feel those performances a little bit better. Not that there's not great performances in the other things in other shows. It's a different vibe. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And I also think that we've got a question about dialogue that will be coming up soon. But like right now, the Mandoverse it's minimal on purpose, so there's a contrast. You're laughing at something. Go for it.
I'm just laughing at Brian Ward. Like the difference between the normal and sad version is the Team America theme song. That's it. Nailed it. Nick, as a Beatle fan, I think I get what Nick, the Lennon versus McCartney Star Wars divide. So great way to look at it. Because also, Paul will tell you, hey, I was actually the artiste first, man. I was avant-garde first, man. But I write some silly little love songs, and everyone thinks that's all I do. You know, that's a great way to look at it, too.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the other things I think that is different about Andor is what is actually going on in the story is that we are dealing with like an incredible tightness, right? We're dealing with rebels who, if they say the wrong thing or look the wrong way at the wrong time, they will be exposed. We're dealing with ISB officers who are jockeying for position in these meetings. With the battlefield of Andor is a lot of time words and looks and gestures.
Yes.
And so it drives us to, you know, it isn't Han making a bold statement and running around a corner shooting things. It is all in the choice of words, the choice of gestures, how much emotion is being, and that tightness, I think, leads to also this different style that is prestige. But again, that's to me it's about this style of show fits what's going on in the galaxy and with these characters.
Yeah, I don't know if this resonates with you, but I like this take on it from our buddy David Aspo. If Georgia's Star Wars is space opera, then Andor's a space stage play. I kind of agree with that from a certain point of view. Dialogue is a foundation of storytelling. Yeah, a lot of what you're talking about. The tension is built into the moments between the words. Yeah, it's great stuff. Speaking of, I was gonna say the tension between the words. That completely wrong. Completely wrong. Stop talking, Ken. Stop talking. We've got coming to the show. Thumbs up, Jed. Are you ready? Give me that thumbs up. I destroyed your intro. Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure. Jed Land is here. Still a little pixelated, but we're getting it in there. We're loading up some files in the background. But Jed, to keep you up to speed, what version of Lady Gaga songs do you like the most? What's your favorite murder in Star Wars? And should Andor have had more smooching?
Oh my gosh. It's so much. It's my kids off air while you guys were recording. They were messing around in the other studio. They've changed my mic. It's been chaos. But I'm here. Favorite murder. We talked about it last week.
I'm just kind of joking, but please, actually, now I want to know your favorite Star Wars murder.
That should be the next our next live stream. Our favorite murders in Star Wars. Go for it.
What is your favorite murder?
We talked about it last week on the live stream, which is Vader going down the hall. It's just I've never fist pumped harder over something so horrific, and it's this duality within all of us where it's like, yes. Why am I cheering on this monster? I don't know. It's a monster that we all knew for so many years. Yeah, I think that's probably my favorite. I'm trying to think of who else. In Andor? Oh,
in terms of murders?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of murders.
I mean, Cassian's first one in the opening is. I was rewatching that again. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm not.
That's a solid murder.
Yeah, solid murder. Jay from Nowhere says Django's decapitation, Hemlock and Andor. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Tim,
I love it.
Oh yeah, this is a great sentence. Cinta shanks that guy.
Forgot about that.
That's right.
That phrase.
She's brutal.
That sounds like the famous Star Trek episode where you only communicate in famous storytelling. Shagra, when the walls fell. Cinta, when she shanked that guy.
That's great.
We have been talking about the style and tone of Andor, Jennifer. In particular, the question was, if we want other Star Wars television shows or stories in the same style and tone of Andor, and if so, like, when would it be set? What kind of stories? That kind of thing.
I think that Andor is so Tony Gilroy specific. It's hard for me to envision another creator being able to do what he did. As we talked about on the news show this week, Star Wars is mystical, fantastical, that's in the DNA, and Andor is the show that has the least of it, right? But it works. It works in the Star Wars buffet. I kind of want more mystical. I want more weird. I was watching the Dark Crystal reimagining. What is it? No, it's not Dark reimagining. The new Dark Crystal show from
it was a series, right? Yeah.
It was a series on Netflix. It's so fantastic, and it just made me go, oh, I want to see kind of more of these elements in Star Wars, which we get a lot of that in The Empire Strikes Back. I want more of that. I love Andor for what it is, but now I kind of want something new. Going back to the roots.
Yeah. Okay. One other thing that I'd be really interested in with the style and tone of, maybe not the style and tone of Andor, but sort of pushing the grittiness, for lack of a better word, is Star Wars is often described as space fantasy. There's a lot of fantasy that's a little bit more like rough and ready. A little bit more like Conan. Fantasy
totally.
Where it's brutal, right? And the stakes of survival are brutal. That's the Phasma novel is basically brutal fantasy. And I wouldn't mind seeing a Jedi story, and could be set in any era, in a Jedi's year in hell on a total warrior planet, right? To play with that sort of idea of when we want to push things and make them more brutal and make them harder on the characters. What do we mean? And can you combine that with fantasy? That would be interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maddie Gunner says, what is best in Force? Exactly.
If we ever touch upon High Republic and live action beyond, I know what they did with Acolyte, but that wasn't necessarily originally conceived or pitched as a High Republic show. But if we were to go straight into the High Republic 200 years before that, I would want to see the high fantastic Jedis being heroes meeting a little bit more of the grounded approach. Could be a good spot for me to have those two things kind of come out, because I think the books did that. I think that's what you're dealing with the hyperspace disaster. You're dealing with a rock as a character. You're dealing with plant alien enemies, and it all worked for me. I bought into it on a grounded level. Geode is a grounded character, literally, maybe. Love it. So.
Wreath. Yeah, it's really everybody's doing their good Conan riffs in the comments. Conan meets Star Wars. Nick Arcus says, Saw, crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their stormtroopers.
Absolutely.
I think this is a great point, David. Great as it is, if Andor had been the first thing Star Wars released instead of A New Hope, Star Wars would have never become the cultural phenomenon it is. And looking back at the history of what was going on in the world when Star Wars was first released, it was like inflation was up, gas prices were up. There was no gas, right? People were just
check on the eggs. What were the egg prices?
Right, exactly. So many similarities. Like, people had grown cynical for like their leaders and their heroes, right? The Vietnam War, all these things. And here Star Wars came along in a time when, like, gritty was in the 1970s, like cinema. And Star Wars came along with a swashbuckling adventure reminiscent of Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, and people were like, yeah, I need that. I need that escapism. I need that fantasy. And I think right now what I'm feeling like, I need that right now. I need that escapism and that fantasy. So I love Andor, and I love what it's given us. But now, after Andor, I need some Mando and Grogu fun.
Yeah. Well, and Skeleton Crew, for me, scratch that itch too. And some people in chat have been mentioning Skeleton Crew. That's a great example of fantasy meeting these so-called relatable, grounded, realistic stuff we're talking about. I think it did a great job. Surprised me in that way.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it week after week, how grounded it was. And you knew these characters, these kids weren't going to die. It wasn't that kind of show. Yeah. But the danger it was still palpable because you cared about them. You didn't want her to rust on a foreign, strange, alien planet. All that great stuff. This whole idea of what if Andor had been made first made me think of the show Blake 7, which I watched when I was a kid, and I rewatched the first season of. It's a British science fiction show from the 70s. And in a way, it's kind of what if Star Wars started with Andor. It is about an authoritarian government, and it's definitely got some high fantasy stuff, weird swamp aliens and Doctor Who level quality costumes, but it's a much fiercer just let's run from this authoritarian government, and made around the same time as Star Wars. So if people can handle lower budget science fiction from the 70s, Blake 7 has a really great relationship with Andor.
Let's look it up. Apologies to my mom calling in her, Mom has the emergency call on. She gets through all barriers I put up.
Wow.
Well, Ken, do you see any other comments or nuances that you wanted to discuss?
I didn't. Let me look through those. Any of you guys got a question? Also, the Star Wars questions. Also about your questions about other parts of Star Wars. Got a super chat to get our attention with it. Go ahead and do that. We'll be here for about 10, 15 more minutes. Yeah, go to the top here. Michael McCarcel answer the question. I'm down for gritty, but it also, but if it also knows how to at least have a little fun. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there was those moments in Andor doing the rewatch I had where number one, it does have a little bit more alien creatures than maybe you want to give it credit for, and there's moments of comedy more early on, and even some of the stuff with Deidre before it gets too wonderfully dark with Cyril works. But in Cyril and Edie is some of the best comedy in Star Wars, which is. It's painful comedy for me, but hey, speaking up.
Yeah, they're definitely they're funny moments in Andor.
Yeah.
And probably more coming with K2SO, which is interesting to think about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was doing my Rogue One rewatch in parts this weekend, and when you first really truly meet him with Jen getting on the U-wing and Cassian, it's really funny. It's great character-based comedy. Love it. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, see how many beats there. Yeah, we haven't been going on and on about Dewey and Freedy enough. Mighty Gunner says Dewey and Freedy are hilarious. Yeah, and I think that to me is a great example of just because it's pulpy and weird and alien doesn't mean it can't be real. What they're expressing and what they're encountering of the two sole survivors of this brutal, unjust massacre, and they're greeted by characters that look like Sid and Marty Krofft made them. But what the characters are expressing is
sound like it.
That moment of like, are we captured again? Are we going to be killed again? And that's one of the most hopeful moments. It's fist pumping. That's why I like doing Freedy. Yes. Like, actually, F the Empire is exactly what Andor and Melshi need to hear in that moment. It's hope is given to them by Sigmund the Sea Monster from Sid and Marty Krofft. It's like amazing.
It is one of those moments on my rewatch again, looking back and thinking I myself may have been. I stand by any criticisms I tossed at Tony Gilroy. I don't know if I'd want to hang out with him at a party, but it's I didn't give him enough, or he and his team, I should say, enough credit for putting one of the more important scenes in that series on the shoulders of H.R. Fish and stuff and his brother. Like it's a big scene for those characters. It's following perhaps the most intense arc, right? One Way Out. Never More Than 12. All of that is followed by that sequence, which is both warm and funny, and has scobbed the Empire and Squigglies and Bigly dinners, Biggie dinners, all these things. Like they put a lot of importance on those two characters, and I respect that.
Absolutely.
Very Shakespearean too, in the way that they're presented. It just reminds me of something you'd see in a Shakespeare play.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that little bit of sometimes I don't think they're quite comedy relief, but that's the Shakespeare move of like in the middle of a horrific tragedy.
Right.
Here's two wacky dudes.
Right. The everyday person, creature.
Yeah.
As someone who played Old Gobo in The Merchant of Venice. Absolutely. There you go. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in space. That's a good way to look at it.
So Svetnik says, dumb question on the podcast. Who says this is a presentation of the Force Center podcast feed? I'm pretty sure it's Jen, but sometimes it doesn't sound like her to me. Should we have a competition in the in the chat to guess who it is?
Yeah. It's not Jen.
Nope.
It's not Jen.
It's not Ken.
It's not. It's not me. See if anyone can figure that out here. There you go.
Oh.
First guess out. Matthew Stokes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Grace. It's my fiance Grace. We had initially. It's just an old school thing too. By the way, it's such an old school. The following is a presentation. But I used to have my old radio partner had done all my shows, but I needed to replace him when his politics, shall we say, didn't evolve with the world around him. So yeah, and then just felt I need to re-record it if we're going to keep using it because it's actually a bad file that I just keep using. So there you go. All right. A few more minutes left here. Anything else? Thank you. But I'm glad you, because the other thing too, it's been around for so long, I forget that it's probably, not been addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, we haven't talked about it in years.
Years.
Yeah. So Svetnik, thanks for the question. Says it is old fashioned, but so is Star Wars in a lot of ways. So it works.
But you're scaring me with that.
Andor begins with, this is a presentation of the Tony Gilroy.
The following is a presentation of
Prestige
NBC Sports. Yeah, exactly. Anything jumping out to you, Jen? Catching up with you here?
I want to know what this is, JMB. Do I dare bring up the Acolyte news from this week? What Acolyte news? What was the news?
I don't think I saw a headline scroll past, and we didn't talk about it on the news show. I think it's that the sort of the viewership remains high in terms of the long tail. I think that's what Jambi is talking about. That's the only bit of news that I saw, and I frankly had forgot about.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to get into it. I know the numbers come from Parrot Analytics, and that sometimes needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But they were good, and I'm not surprised by any of that.
Yeah. Let's see if I get this. This published 6 days ago. This is from Collider. The Acolyte is showing plenty of streaming demand months after the series was canceled by Lucasfilm, according to Parrot Analytics. The story, starring Amanda Stenberg as two different protagonists, is currently listed at scoring more than 20 times the average demand seen in the current streaming landscape. It's been a little while since I've done a deep dive on Parrot Analytics, but Parrot Analytics really is like they made up an algorithm that is what the little amount of information that streamers actually report, combined with social media traffic, combined with weather reports. It is a best attempt to capture the numbers when they're not being reported. So I think from Parrot Analytics, I always have I got to take a deep breath. It's not direct. It's not like old school Nielsen, and it's not direct reporting from the streamers. So I always take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And both, because I think the first time we discussed it, it was maybe looking at numbers that were down for an older show years ago. This came up years ago on the show. Not to put water on any fires, because I'm not surprised that the show still is being discussed and watched.
But imagining taking away the grain of salt and saying, "Oh, this is accurate," and a lot of people are either rewatching the show or checking it out, a year later. How do we feel about that, Ken?
Look, I'd love the show to continue. I really would. It's just hard to separate the realities of if I was Leslie Headland and got asked to come back. I don't know if my answer is yes. And then my fear is, well, then who would then step in? Because I'd want her to continue her story and her vision along with her team. But the idea of it continuing and living in some fashion, totally behind that idea, because there's still so much left on that table.
Jen?
I think that I really want it to come back. I think because it was so expensive, they would have to figure out a way to do it cheaper,
Yeah.
big time. But just I think that everything is I don't know what's going on with what they're green lighting and what is going to be coming up and what they want to put priority on. I feel like it was such a risk, and now they're going to be scared of that. Not just them. I think all across the board, nobody really knows what to do.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if the numbers are true and it is continuing to grow, I would really like to, in many sectors of our reality, move back to a world where consumers get to vote with their dollars and time. And if it really is getting more views and getting views is what is needed for a streaming service, and Disney has their ad version now, so it's literally making them money if people are watching with the ads directly. If it gets it, like, I would say, like, yes, please at least do a stream down, do 2 or 3 made for streaming 90-minute specials and wrap up the story of Acolyte. Let us in on the secret of who the stranger is. Was he kicked out of the Sith, like I think. Follow up on Darth Plagueis. And most importantly to me, I don't feel like the twins story is complete. I feel like this is a story to me about 2 people who want things and get trapped up in different groups' needs. The witches, their family of origin, need them to be something, and then the Jedi need them to be something, and then the remnants of the Sith need them to be something. And I want to get to that point where do these people how do they ever escape, and do these 2 sisters truly get to choose fully who they want to be? I would love to see that story completed.
Absolutely.
This is a great conversation starter, because I'm wondering the same thing. I think going forward, much of the TV content from Star Wars will be animated. I can see that focusing Star Wars more in the movie theater, which is quote unquote where it belongs, right? And then having more animated content on the streaming platform. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it does, because the animation does just seem to be like the people who like it pay attention, and the people who don't yell filler episode every once in a while on social media. But other than that, it's relatively peaceful.
Yeah. And Brian Ward
also wants this burning mystery answered. And Basil, clear those wires out of the ship. I would, you know what? What if the second season was just from Basil's perspective, and he was the Sith Master, and it explains all the weird choices he makes?
Do the Jar Jar, but with Basil.
Let's go full Darth Basil. Come on.
Yes, I'd be on board for that. As far as the future of TV being more animated, I can see that. I think Star Wars Celebration will provide some clarity on that. Is right now the only set announcement seems to be in that arena, right? We do know Ahsoka season 2 is I think in production now, just starting. And I think there's so much anticipation by Star Wars fans for the next animated show, series of shorts, tales of. I still contend you could do an animated movie and put it on Disney Plus. That'd be a good thing to do. So all that stuff seems to be where we might be headed. We'll see, but we don't know. We don't know.
They could surprise us at Celebration.
Oh my gosh, what a surprise that would be, man.
Yeah.
I want to share this from Nick Mitford, who says he echoes my recommendation of Blake 7. As a child of the 70s in the UK, it was essential viewing along with Doctor Who. Amazing ship design, very much ahead of its time in terms of computer. I think it is currently on BritBox. So if anybody's curious to check it out, it really is. I rewatched the first season, like I said, and I got to make time to watch the rest of it, because it's a fascinating comparison to Star Wars.
Super chat from Joel Davis. Thank you for super chat. Asks a great question here. Do you think we have a bad habit of trying to limit, quote, what Star Wars is? Because to me, the old Legends EU is just not, if not more Star Wars to me than even Lucas's Star Wars. I've always joked the what is Star Wars is so wide of a net for doing 3D to launch it at the IP. That all comes down to, I don't know, personal interest. I've been on the record. EU was never much Star Wars to me, and I think George was tremendously distant from it and I felt that as a fan, and I didn't continue with it. I think this to me is more connected to his ethos. But again, it's all, what is Star Wars is such a wide, wonderful question that I think we can still struggle with it.
Yeah, Jen, what are your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, there are so many great things within the EU that I love. I love the Isalamiri. I love that. I love it. It's weird. It is weird and wild, and that to me is what Star Wars is. And so to get away, I want it to go back to that. I love the weird. The holiday special. Come on. Nobody's gonna make it, but unless it's in Lego
I think we have
form.
a chance of that. Yeah.
I agree with Nick Arcus. Hard limits on hot chocolate. No, I think that isn't for me. I think that's all. To me, it's all about it. That's what we were talking about when the buffet. It's not about what is and isn't Star Wars. It's about what is Star Wars to you. And there are parts of the EU that's not my Star Wars. I think there's some like design stuff and some storytelling stuff that feels a little bit more science fiction. It feels a little bit more sort of 90s, 2000s gritty in a way that doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. But all I have to do is go, then I'm not going to spend much time on it. And I'm so happy for people who love the EU. And that's your Star Wars. If Chewie with his bounty hunter flat top is more Star Wars for you, great.
Yeah.
It isn't for me, but I do not need to dictate to anyone else what Star Wars is. And to me, it's much more about how do we talk about it? How do we share our own desires without disrespecting other people's?
Yeah. And in the past, like, I'll leave it now. I'll go hard in the paint against the EU if y'all want me to. Like, I have some issues with it, but because of 11 years of Force Center, I make sure I have to keep to what we preach because that's the right way to do it. And I started with, I do not like the character Mara Jade. And then I had to realize at one point, as I've said before, like, but for a lot of young girls growing up as Star Wars fans in the 90s, she's what they had. And so I have to be respectful of that. And that's where we are. Where to Joel's great question. Yeah. Like, there's so many people that their entry point in Star Wars was some weird off in the corner EU book or a legend story now. And I've really worked on myself to accept it. Now, there is a rumor percolating. I even have an actor's name behind it, but that Dash Rendar could one day show up in Star Wars.
Stop
and
it.
that's going to challenge me so much. I will be in a car angry with a pitchfork, but I'm going to have to let it go.
I would argue that Dash Rendar has already appeared in
He's
Star
technically
Wars.
Canon. It's Jason Fry mentioned him in a book and all that stuff.
Yeah, but I think he was in the first season of Mandalorian with the name Toro Calican.
No, blasphemy! Blasphemy! I will not have that. God,
no, but I think that's what I think. I got to revisit Dash Rendar, but I think I wouldn't mind a character who's like, the shoulder pads aren't just a design thing. This is a guy who has shoulder pad energy as a person, and that's the character.
I liked Dash Rendar. I don't know why. Why did I like Dash Rendar?
Why? I want to know, Jed. Why did you like Kevin Costner as Han Solo?
I don't know. It's all we had. I was starved. I was starved for Star Wars content.
Yep.
Is it Ryan Gosling? Is Ryan Gosling going to be?
I'll tell you off air. I'm not going to play the scoop game because I don't have this. I don't have it. But I'll tell you what's happening. John B, real quick. John B says, really hoping to run into you guys at Celebration. Well, it will have to be 2027 or maybe 2029 because unfortunately the three of us will not be in Japan later next month. Sadly.
Yeah. But we would love to meet you. James Farley, who brought us into this topic today with the style and tone of Andor.
You did it, James. You did.
Thank you, James, and thank you for the pointing out that gritty is a loaded word. James says, I can see both sides. The prequels pushed hard against the expectations of what Star Wars is, as said by the first trilogy. That was a huge point of criticism at the time, but also a big strength. I think that's what I keep coming back to is like, I kind of just get excited when Star Wars takes a swing, even though it's just marketing. That's why I really like that first Andor trailer with modern music. I like it when Star Wars takes a swing And I think that is the spirit of Lucas, is that it's a vast galaxy, multiple galaxies now, and you can push at the limits without breaking it.
And to Joel's first question, that's why that what is Star Wars is it should to me remain as wide open, but because I was there in the theater of this ain't Star Wars, and now Phantom Menace is the Star Wars movie I put on more than any movie just to watch a Star Wars. So
it's just expanding the palette, right?
Yes, expanding the palette. Joel has a follow-up, and Jen, actually, I think this is something that we address this last week a little bit, but I think you wanted to talk about more here.
Oh.
Remember, Joel Davis, thanks again, Joel, for the generous super chat. We really appreciate your question. Thoughts on that weird idea from the Lucas Underworld show that they were going to make the Emperor sympathetic. So to summarize a little bit, I can't remember where exactly it came from, but the idea that maybe there was going to be something in Palpatine's past, and perhaps he was, heartbroken by a woman, all these kind of things. I can't confirm exactly where and how, and there's a lot of things that do come out of this, but that had been floated out there, Jen, and you had some thoughts on that, I remember.
Yeah, that Palpatine is an incel. And I was like, wait, hold on. I know. I was like, yes, make it, you cowards. And there I am having to eat my words. I take it back. I didn't read the script. I had no idea. I'm not going to trust Rick McCallum again, because he was like, this is amazing and sexy. Okay. So
yeah, a lot of it that may become other McCallum stuff. Yeah. You're right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So you don't like the idea. Yeah. And I agree. Yeah.
No, I don't like that.
If what led him to the dark side was a lady didn't like me is extremely dangerous, especially in the 2000s, early 2000s.
Yes.
But if, like the Clone Wars, everything in that show was George either started it or George rubber stamped it, I don't know if I ever need to hear it, but my personal headcanon is no one in Star Wars is born cackling, mustache twirling evil. Something bad did happen to Palpatine, just like bad things happened to Anakin and Ben Solo and Asajj Ventress and everybody who chose the dark side for some period of their life. I believe something awful happened to Sheev. And the moral of Star Wars is we can't always control the horrible things that happen to us, but we can control how we respond to them. And Sheev is a lost cause. He responded this way. I don't want it to be.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be Cynthia wouldn't go to the junior prom with me. I don't want that to be the thing that broke Sheev forever and doomed the galaxy.
Yeah, Joel has a follow-up. It was the God of War writer who saw the script, and he said that apparently Palpatine got his heart broken by a, quote, heartless woman. His words, not mine. Yeah.
Lord.
Right.
No.
And especially for the time, and there, we've changed just how we present our stories, thank God. And if you're trying to do prestige at that time, to your point, Joseph, like you said earlier, like it just, even if there's some truth to it, I don't trust that it would have been received in the right way, or maybe even delivered in the right way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was it was the God of War writer who saw the script and said that apparently Palpatine got his heart broken by a heartless woman. Yeah, I think it really comes down to the old execution.
Yeah. Jen, certainly not speaking for a year, but just something that
he got dumped by a woman whose name was Order 66, which explains where he got the name of that.
Yeah. And again, I agree with Palpatine show that not the one I want to be
sums
the
it up.
sexy one. Yeah, exactly.
Remember that brief window after Rise of Skywalker came out, and then I can't remember the novelization. What the first clarification was, like, it's a clone. But immediately out of Rise of Skywalker, we all thought, like, maybe procreated in the traditional manner.
Yeah.
And it was a dark time in the fandom.
Gosh, I didn't even think about. All right.
And actually, Joel, great stuff to do. I know for myself, I still prefer the Plagueis novel approach of Palpatine Bakes of Eden. Omen Kid Antichrist to release Joffrey Baratheon. Yeah, there's I do love and see it again. When I sometimes say, hey, I go hard in the paint against EU or Legends, that Lucino novel is technically Legends and EU, and I really do love it. A lot of it wouldn't necessarily connect or work in a lot of ways now, but it's so good, and I still kind of in the back of my head kind of have his version as my soft canon background of Palpatine.
I forgot about this, Brian Ward. We used to talk about Palpatine's sex
Palpatine sex math.
of like, okay, based on the ages, like, could he have had a spouse or a partner that we knew nothing about during this era, during that era?
Oh my gosh. At least it's a spouse. Usually it's the mother, and so I guess, I don't know. It's all bad. This is why they didn't greenlight it. Thank God.
This is it. Yeah. Sly Moore, truther system. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well,
I remember really enjoying the Darth Plagueis novel too, and I remember that being like I remember that being like Palpatine felt all this anger and confusion, and he couldn't talk to his parents or his society about it. And I'm fine with that. That to me is still human. Of like, there's plenty of people who are like, I have all these feelings and I don't know what to do with them, and I don't trust their people around me to help. So another Sith coming in and manipulating that, to me, that's human.
Yeah.
I just don't want him to be like, he's born and he shoots the doctor in the face with the force lightning because he's just born evil. Like, I don't want to be human.
Actually, I do want to see that. Now I think about it, I do want to see that. That's what I do.
And the doctor drops him, and he's doomed. He's doomed.
And the baby, he lands on his back, and he's like walking like a spider.
I love it.
Yeah. See,
right.
I don't know.
The Exorcist, yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. That's it. Oh my gosh. Go picture on that one. I'm
Go
sold.
picture indeed.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
All right. Have we done it? I think we've done it.
I think
we've done it.
Yeah.
I think we've done it. Thanks for hanging out with us here. We love doing our Star Wars questions live with you all. A lot of fun. Usually every Monday, noon Pacific until further, but we're solid on that time right now. We got our new show tomorrow. We'll try to put together a Star Wars ranked in the weekend. Hey, do me a favor. Check out last week we did Midi-chlorians or Why We Love Star Wars. Me and Scotty J. the Bombad Cast sat down for that ahead of his Star Wars Celebration panel. He's going to have a great presentation on Midi-chlorians. If you haven't checked out that episode, either in podcast form, but on YouTube, go back, watch it, give it a like, bump it up, trying to get some attention to it, and those kind of conversations. So it was great. It was deep. It was went well beyond Star Wars to life and death and the big question. So that's it for us. You can find us on Force Center at Force Center Pod on social media. Podcasts available in a lot of spots. Find us on Sundays. We release Databank Brawl. Check that out. Podcast only. Go back and listen to the old episodes where Exor Sith would have fit in nicely back in the Databank Brawl days. And you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Force Center. Links for merch down below if you're watching on YouTube. Give us a like. You can follow me at Ken Navzok or my website, KenNavzok.com. Jen, where can they find and follow you and all your thoughts on the Yes of the Army?
Yeah, you can find, I think, a video about that on Instagram at Jennifer Landa or TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
There you go, Joseph. You are still in the process of making a feature film. You're in the post-production phase, which means it only gets harder. So give us an update on where they can support your ongoing adventure.
Yeah, you can check out my website, josephscrimshaw.com. There is a link there to this great organization in Minnesota called Film North, which partners with films and allows us to take one-time tax-deductible donations. And I'm going to have to do a little bit more fundraising here to finish up the post-production and make it look and sound real good.
Look and sound real good. That's the goal. That is it. All right. We'll see you all next time here on Force Center. Bye.